What's up, guys? Farzin Vasugian here on a Tuesday evening. Welcome in. Hope you're all doing well. Hope everyone's having a great election day as we're getting ready for the votes to come in and all that good stuff. But if you guys want a little escape from politics, why not talk about the 8-0 Kansas City Chiefs right now? Yes, Kansas City 8-0 on the season, and there are a lot of good things to talk about right now with this Chiefs team at the moment. A lot of things to get into here. We're going to touch on that. Not going to be a very long episode. And I know, generally speaking, whenever I do these Monday podcasts, well, this week it's a Tuesday because we just came off a Monday night game. I get a lot of questions about the upcoming game. I will say I'll reserve those for tomorrow's podcast. We will go back to our finally normal schedule where we will have a Wednesday podcast previewing the game. This week, it's going to be the Chiefs and the Broncos. And I think that's going to be a very interesting one, probably more interesting than some people might anticipate. And then we'll also talk about some of the things around the NFL as well on tomorrow's podcast. And then the Red Friday live chat, that'll return on Friday. That'll be on Facebook and YouTube. So make sure you guys join me for that as well. We're going to have that Friday evening this week. So some good things to look forward to here with the Chiefs Zone podcast, the Red Friday live chat, all kinds of good content coming your way this week for some Chiefs topics to discuss. I see a lot of you guys are here chatting along. Come on in. Let's chat it up. I see some guys on Instagram. JSL07, what a crazy game last night. Yes. Gavin says, I was there last night for my first game ever at Arrowhead. Well, Gavin, you picked a pretty good first game to attend. In the rain, overtime, Mahomes having his best game of the year up to this point. You picked a really good game to go to. So that's pretty cool though. It always sucks when you pay a lot of money, especially if it's your first game, to go to a game and you lose because it sucks. That's like my biggest fear whenever I go to Vegas to see the Chiefs and Raiders play. It's like, man, am I going to be able to see them win, or did I just spend a lot of money to see them lose? Because I went to the Vegas Golden Knights Western Conference Finals game, one of their Western Conference games a couple of years ago. I was actually on my birthday, and the game's going into, well, first of all, the Golden Knights are down. What is it, like 2-1 with less than 2 minutes to go? And I'm thinking, shit, did I just spend some money on the Golden Knights to lose? Tickets, hotel, all that. Vegas that ain't cheap. They tied the game and they won it like 1 or 2 minutes into overtime. So that's sports for you. That is sports for you. Speaking of sports and tickets, all that stuff, I get my tickets from SeatGeek. That is where you guys can go to get your sports ticketing needs. If you see the ticket price, a green dot next to it, that is good. That means you're paying a good price. Buy those tickets. If you see a red dot, that means the resellers are placing too much money on that right there. For resellers, and definitely want to avoid those. Go to SeatGeek.com, pick your tickets, and if you're a new SeatGeek customer, use my promo code Farzine, and you'll save $20 off your first purchase from SeatGeek. Go to SeatGeek.com. New customers can enter my promo code Farzine at checkout, and you'll save $20 off your first purchase from SeatGeek. All right, like I said, I don't want this to be a very long podcast. I know everyone's going to be glued to their TVs doing something else tonight, so let's get right into it. And I want to talk about this Chiefs offense, because if we're being honest, the defense didn't have the best game last night. They didn't allow still 29 consecutive games where you hold teams below 28 points, which is good. But I think the defense at times certainly slipped when they needed to step up in situations where they normally do step up. But that was not the case last night. So what does Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs offense, what do? They step it up. This Chiefs offense had their best game of the year. 3 touchdowns, all of them on third downs, by the way. 3 touchdown passes, I should be clear, from Patrick Mahomes. 291 yards from Patrick Mahomes. He threw for 291 against Baltimore. That was when they won 27-20. Threw for 262 last week against the Raiders. Threw for 154 against the 49ers, but I don't think that's a fair, that's not an accurate representation of what he did. He threw for 331 against the Saints, but didn't have a touchdown in that game, and threw for 291. Let's just go over the first few games. 291 against the Ravens, 151 against the Bengals. That's the lowest all season. 217 against the Falcons, 245 against the Chargers, 331 against the Saints, and then after the bye week, 154 against the 49ers, 262 against the Raiders, and 291 against the Bucks. So he's definitely been playing much better these last 4 to 5 games compared to the first couple of weeks in the season. And obviously, great game. No turnovers from Patrick Mahomes. The only turnover was from Travis Kelce. Fortunately, the defense, as critical as I was about the defense, especially late in the game, they did prevent the Bucks from scoring before halftime, which was huge because that could have been a big difference maker. I think Kelce had an opportunity. The Chiefs offense had an opportunity to put up more points and make it a 2-possession game going into the locker room, and they did it because of the Kelce fumble. But thankfully, the Chiefs defense prevented the Bucks from making any kind of a big play to get within field goal range, and I think that really was the big difference maker in that game. So we'll have to see what the defense does in trying to respond. It's still a solid game overall from the defense, just maybe not as dominant as to what we're used to with this Chiefs team. And hey, you know what? The offense stepped it up. You can't really run this narrative anymore about how the defense saved Mahomes or the defense carries Mahomes, and not last night. I mean, listen, scoring 27 points on the road against the Raiders. I don't care who it is. You go on the road and score 27 points. That's never easy. And you come away with the win. That's always huge. Score 30 against Tampa Bay at home. And I know Tampa Bay, not the same without their 2 wide receivers, but it was a dogfight. And let's start here, because I get this a lot from people. Oh, the Chiefs are not the best team in the NFL because they're not blowing teams out. Meanwhile, Detroit and Cincinnati, even though Cincinnati's below 500, Dan Orlovsky was trying to run this narrative that they're the biggest threat to Kansas City because they beat them before, even though it's been since 2022 calendar year. Okay, all right. I guess the Bengals are still living off that kind of success from a couple of years ago, even though the Chiefs are in the present. But that's fine. They can say in the past. Who else is a threat, allegedly? The Ravens, the Lions, the Bengals, because these teams blow teams out when they win in some of their wins. Meanwhile, I'm looking at this Chiefs team and I'm saying, okay, they're not blowing teams out. Fine. But they've won 14 in a row. That's how easy is it to win 14 in a row? Can someone answer that for me? I don't think it's easy to win 14 in a row. And I'm saying that because the Chiefs have never won 14 in a row in franchise history. They're 8-0 right now. The last time they were 8-0 was Andy Reid's first year as the head coach of the Chiefs. They've been 9-0 twice. Once in 2003 and the other in 2013. And they're one game away from tying that. So I'm looking at this Chiefs team, and people want to discredit Kansas City's 8-0 start and the 14-game winning streak because they've had a lot of close games. Oh, Buffalo missed a field goal, and the 49ers had a blocked PAT, and they didn't know the overtime rules. And they got lucky in the Ravens game, both Ravens games, I guess, because Zay Flowers fumbled on his way to the end zone in the AFC title game and likely was barely out of bounds. The Bengals commit a penalty to help extend Kansas City's drive. The Falcons on 4th and inches fail. It's like people keep bringing up all of these reasons as to why the Chiefs are winning with the narrowest of margins. And I'm over here saying they're winning. I think that's what makes Kansas City a scarier football team than Detroit and all these other teams that are blowing teams out and have these more flashier games. By the way, you know who blew out a lot of teams last year? Baltimore blew out a lot of teams last year. You know who else had a lot of blowout victories last year? San Francisco had a lot of blowout victories last year. You know who was red hot going into the playoffs last year? The Buffalo Bills. What do all 3 of those teams have in common? They all lost to the Chiefs by 1 possession. So To me, like you want to listen. I get it as fans. We want to put a column for flashy wins. Okay, that's fine and all. I get it. Fans will have those kinds of discussions all day long, but that's not a thing. It's not a real thing at the end of the day. And that's why I wanted to start with this, because we hear so much about how the Chiefs are not putting teams away. For example, the Chiefs had a very close game with the Raiders. Meanwhile, the Bengals, who the Chiefs beat earlier in the year, they dominated the Raiders. That game wasn't even close, especially in the second half. Okay, but what are the two records for both teams? The Chiefs are 8-0. The Bengals are 4-5. The Bengals just won their first home game, and it took them until November to do it. So I'm not really sure, like, what's the purpose of this discussion? What's the point when people say, oh, the Chiefs are not blowing teams out? Okay, they're not blowing teams out. They don't cover the spread. A lot of us probably end up losing our same game parlays because we pick the over for the Chiefs to cover, and they don't do so. So, okay, they don't cover when it comes to the betting line. So what? They're winning football games. Last I checked, they don't hand the Super Bowl trophy to the team that covers the spread. They give it to the team that wins straight up. Whoever scores more points on the scoreboard, essentially. So, and look, let me just say this. As a fan of football, like the way the Ravens game ended, the way the Bengals game ended, the Falcons game, the Chargers game, obviously the Chiefs overcame a 10-0 deficit. The Raiders game, okay, it was a one-score game, but it was kind of anticlimactic with the onside kick, and the Chiefs were able to kneel the ball after the 2-minute warning. The Tampa Bay, obviously, going into overtime. These are fun games to watch. And then look at all the playoff games last year, except for the wild card game against Miami. All of those games came down to the wire. The Buffalo Bills missing the field goal in the end there, and what was a roller coaster emotion of a game for both teams. Going in the AFC Championship game, throwing the ball to Marquez Valdez-Scantling of all people to ice the game into 2 minutes. And then the Super Bowl 58, I don't need to tell you guys how that ended. You already know that. That moment lives rent-free in all of our heads. The Chiefs are having these exciting games. Would I like a blowout game in the Super Bowl? Perhaps that'd be preferred. On the winning side, of course, not like Super Bowl 55, but you know what, man? Sometimes that's just the way football is. You watch these games to get excited. Like look at the New Orleans game, the San Francisco game. Those games are boring, man. I kind of forgot what it was like to win by multiple possessions. I was watching those games. I'm like, this is boring. This is a really boring fourth quarter. The Chiefs are just putting these teams away. They're not really doing anything. So when I'm watching these games, I'm just coming to appreciate this Chiefs team every single week. It's not easy to win in the NFL. It's really not. And to do it 8-0 to start off a season. And by the way, what were people saying to start off the season? Kansas City has the AFC North to start off the season. Okay, Chiefs won those games. They go on the road. They beat Atlanta. Oh, pass interference. They got away. Okay, but they got the ball back because the Chiefs went 3 and out on the following drive. So, and they got 3 penalties in a row on that drive. And what does Atlanta do on their second chance? On 4th and inches, run the worst running play possible and lose 3 to 4 yards. So, as far as I'm concerned, Atlanta got their second chance in that game. It's almost like that Saints-Rams NFC title game where they bitch about the Rams getting away with a very obvious interference. It wasn't called, but someone committed an interference. Okay, last I checked, Jared Goff was in that game, and the Saints got away with a massive face mask on Jared Goff. Oh, by the way, what else happened in that game? The Saints won the overtime coin toss. And if I'm not mistaken, all you had to do was score a touchdown and win that game. That was before the overtime rules changed again for the postseason. But what does Drew Brees do? He throws an interception. So people want to bitch about a missed call because people are doing this last night with Jawan Taylor. Okay, have that same energy, by the way, for Trent McDuffie getting called for that BS penalty. against that wide receiver, who, by the way, was dragging him around. That's what should have been called, but it wasn't. Good teams find a way to overcome bad officiating. And listen, officiating has been horrendous this season. Really, really bad. It's been awful. It's not just Kansas City. It's been happening across the board this year. It only gets talked about a lot with Kansas City because everyone has their eye on this football team. Everyone knows this team is making history. Everyone wants to see this team in their downfall. Right now, they're 8-0. Everyone wants to be able to watch them lose their first game of the season. So, as far as I'm concerned, this is a Chiefs team that is finding crazy ways to win football games. They used to find creative ways to lose games. Now it's the other way around, where they're winning these weird games in the most creative, fashionable ways you can. So ultimately, this is just a Chiefs team that will do whatever it takes to win. It's not going to be the prettiest. There are a lot of things the Chiefs would have loved to take back in last night's game against the Bucs. There are a lot of things they would have done would have loved to have done differently in that Raiders game, in the Atlanta game, the Bengals game, the Ravens game. All of those games right there, the Chargers game for sure. In those first 5 minutes, there were a lot of things they would have loved to take back. But the Chiefs found a way to win when they had to. They're 8-0 right now. And I think these next two games right here, Denver and Buffalo, are going to be two very difficult games. I know Buffalo doesn't really have a quality win right now, but the Chiefs just, don't seem to do well against Buffalo in the regular season, which is fine. I think we all know who really wins that battle when it matters the most. The Raiders, that's going to be another dogfight, even though the Raiders are getting worse and worse. They just fired a couple of their assistant coaches on the offensive side of the ball. I could actually see the Chiefs dropping a game against the Chargers, especially if they're healthier this time. But, in general, this Chiefs football team, they're 8-0 right now. And let's see. There's a very good chance they could be 12-0 or 11-1 going into the month of December. If the Chiefs are 11-1 at the very least, even if they're 10-2, well, let's just say 10-2. Let's go with 10-2. If they're 10-2 going into December, I think Chiefs fans should feel really, really good. And by the way, I don't think it'll be 10-2. I think at the worst they'll be 11-1. Because let's talk about DeAndre Hopkins and Travis Kelce. Because I don't think you can talk about one of those guys without bringing up the other. I know DeAndre Hopkins didn't play much, didn't get involved much in that Raiders game, but his presence, that made a huge difference in that football game. The Raiders showed a lot of respect to Kansas City's pass catchers, Travis Kelce, DeAndre Hopkins, and then you've got some speedsters across the board with McCole Hardman and Xavier Worthy, Justin Watson as well, who got involved last night. It feels like that's the most he's been involved in any game this season. So when you look at this Chiefs team right now, and they have DeAndre Hopkins and Mahomes, the way those two guys played together last night, it almost looked as if they had been playing together a very long time. They really looked like they've been together for 10 seasons. But this is only their second game together. This was Hopkins' first full week practicing with the Chiefs, and he had an extra day to do so because this game was on a Monday night. And you look at the result, 9 targets, 8 receptions, 86 yards, a pair of touchdowns. Boy, Chiefs fans, they were living it up when DeAndre Hopkins found the end zone. This might be one of the biggest acquisitions the Chiefs have ever made. And, is this something that we ever expected at the beginning of the season when you had Rashee Rice, you had Xavier Worthy, you were anticipating Hollywood Brown to come back very soon at the time? No. There's no reason to believe DeAndre Hopkins would have ended up being a Kansas City Chief, but that's just the way it all panned out. And by the way, how many touchdowns did the Chiefs score in this game? They scored 4. Okay. Who scored all the touchdowns? Samaje Perine scored a touchdown. DeAndre Hopkins scored 2, and Kareem Hunt scored 1. What do all 3 of those guys have in common? None of those guys were in training camp with the Chiefs. this year. None of them. Kareem Hunt was on the couch. Pirine was with the Broncos, and Hopkins was with the Titans. All 4 of those touchdowns from those 3 guys, again, 2 from Hopkins, none of those were from players who were with the team during training camp. And I've said this before. One of the difficult things about bringing in a player, especially on the offensive side of the ball mid-season, learning the offensive playbook and the scheme can take a little bit of time. But Kareem Hunt, he's familiar with the system. Yeah, there have been some changes over the years, but in general, it's really the same thing. And listen, running the football and being told where to run to, not a lot of difficulties there. DeAndre Hopkins, I mean, this guy is a pro's pro. This guy knows what to do and what not to do. This guy went in there into traffic, into double, triple coverage, going out there, making receptions, and then scoring 2 touchdowns for the Chiefs. Samaje Perine. Yeah, I was actually glad to. I've been calling for the Chiefs to use Samaje Perine more. I don't know if Samaje Perine maybe needed to get acclimated more or what the situation was, but Kareem Hunt still had a big workload. But we got to see more of Samaje Perine in this game, and that was pretty cool to see. All 3 touchdown scorers were not with the Chiefs in the month of August. None of them. Okay, maybe Perine was towards the end of August, but that was after training camp. Look, the Chiefs were dealt a really bad situation with their injuries to Pacheco, Rice. Hollywood's injury was worse than we anticipated. Clyde Edwards-Helaire is yet to play. You're 8-0, and you're doing this without your top 2 wide receivers and your top 2 running backs coming into the season. Think about that. If you guys told me that Mahomes would have more interceptions than touchdowns prior to yesterday, of course, and that the Chiefs would be without Rashee Rice for a majority of the season, would not have Hollywood Brown for a single game, would be without Isaiah Pacheco for a majority of the season, would not have Clyde Edwards-Helaire, I would say this Chiefs team is going to be below 500. I mean, seriously, would anyone not say that? If you say that about any team across the board, I don't care how good or how bad they are. You tell me any of the 32 NFL teams are going to be without their top 2 wideouts and top 2 running backs, and their quarterback would be one of the league leaders in interceptions. You would all say that this is a team that's definitely below 500. There's no way this is a 500 team. Kansas City's different. Kansas City's different. And listen, it's not just one person. It's not just one coach or one player. I mean, yes, Andy Reid doing a lot of things, but Andy Reid's been a great coach for a very long time. Yes, he's winning a lot of the Super Bowls now compared to the first, 18, 19 years in his career. But he's had great teams in Philadelphia and even in Kansas City before Mahomes arrived. But the players that he has now, both on offense and defense, and I know the offense the past year and a half, not what we're accustomed to with the Kansas City Chiefs, but they're finding ways to win. And that is what matters at the end of the day. That is what matters. That's why Kansas City is the scariest football team right now in the NFL. Again, say what you want about the Lions and the Ravens blowing teams out. Okay, fine. But when you're finding ways to win close games, and not just 1 or 2 close games, we're talking a 14-game winning streak dating back to last season, and a majority of them have been close games. Off the top of my head, which of these games have not been close? Okay, the Chargers game in Week 18, that was close, but that was the game where you had all backups in there, but from both sides. Okay, fine. The Miami game in the playoffs, okay, that was a one-sided game, but let's not act like that was not impressive or anything, because it wasn't that Miami team. Everyone was high on that Miami hype train with all the scoring they were doing last year. Remember that? And the Chiefs held them to 14 in Germany, and then they held them to 7 at Arrowhead. And by the way, I don't want to hear any of this crap about the weather. They played each other in a indoor neutral stadium outside of the U.S., and the Chiefs held them to 14. One of those touchdowns should not have happened because Chris Jones, after a third down stop, made some comment that the referees heard, and they threw the penalty there. So Neither here nor there, though. The Chiefs still won that game. What other games have been more than one score during this winning streak? The Saints game and the 49ers game. So outside of that, every single game's been close. And some of these teams you've defeated twice. You defeated the Chargers twice. You defeated the 49ers twice, the Ravens twice, the Bengals twice. I mean, at the end of the day, this is a football team that is finding ways to win. And it has not been the prettiest. All three of those playoff games that were one-score games, they were all ugly wins, but they were wins. That's all that matters at the end of the day with this Chiefs team. And again, I know people want to make a big deal about the offense, and this is going to be my next point here. I think if you guys follow me on social media, I put this out shortly before I started live streaming, but I put this out there. This is a Chiefs team that has improved drastically on offense. Let me read you some numbers here. Going into the bye week, and Kansas City's bye week was week 6. Going into the bye week, the Chiefs were 9th in the NFL in third down conversion rate. That's actually good. You're in the top 10. That's pretty good. However, the Chiefs were 30th in the NFL in red zone efficiency. That is terrible. That's third worst in the NFL. So 9th in third down conversions, 30th in red zone efficiency. Fast forward to today, going into week 10, Kansas City is first in the NFL in third down conversions. They are 12th in the NFL in red zone efficiency. That they went from 30th to 12th. I mean, when it comes to improvements in both categories, they have really stepped it up. Third down and red zone efficiency, those two things really do prove how tough you are and how focused you are as a football team, in my opinion. And you saw the Chiefs on third down these last 3 games. You saw them in the red zone these last 3 games. They're 11 of 13 on third downs. I mentioned this last night. 4 of 4 last night, a perfect 4 of 4, something they really needed. And what did Andy Reid say about the red zone coming off the bye week? He said, this is an area we absolutely need to improve on. Oh, they've improved, all right. They have improved. They have absolutely improved. They've really improved. I'm just reading some comments here. I think ultimately, again, 14 wins in a row. That's never happened in Chiefs history. The Chiefs, I think, finished remember 2015, they started the season 1-5. They finished the regular season with a 10-game winning streak. That's the most ever in a regular season. But they did win a playoff game, their first playoff game in 22 years at the time. And that ended up being an 11-game winning streak. And then they lose to the Patriots in Foxborough a week later. But 11 in a row. That's the most in Chiefs history. That is the most before this season, of course. And this Chiefs team, despite all of the injuries, they found a way to overcome it. I brought this up before, but I'll say it again. Remember last year with the drops and how bad the Chiefs were on offense? The Monday Night Football game, the heartbreaking loss then, the offside call with Kadarius Toney, the loss to Denver, the loss to the Raiders, 2 embarrassing losses from the Chiefs. But you know what I noticed about the Chiefs team coming off of those bad losses? When you listen to them in their interviews, whether it was in the locker room or in press conferences, they still had a very positive attitude, a very positive outlook. They did not look like a football team that was coming off a loss. They weren't going around feeling sorry for themselves. Oh, man, we look terrible. In that Germany game, or the week of the Germany game, I should say, coming off the Denver loss, I mean, you could hardly tell the Chiefs were coming off a loss. I mean, they were smiling. They were happy to be in Germany. They were excited to get the game underway. And I still remember the narrative going into that game. Kansas City was coming off a loss to Denver, and Miami just recently at the time put up 70 on Denver. And people thought, oh, Miami's going to mop the floor with the Chiefs. Not even close. My whole point is with people making such a big deal about the Chiefs not covering the spread or not blowing teams out, man, Kansas City's finding ways to win. The teams that are blowing teams out, like Miami was blowing a lot of teams out last year, and the Chiefs beat them twice, both in, one of them was a one-score game. The second one was a blowout in the playoffs. Buffalo, again, they were red hot going into the playoffs. The Chiefs found a way to beat them. Baltimore was blowing out a lot of teams. Chiefs beat them in the AFC title game. The 49ers were blowing out a lot of teams. Well, the Chiefs beat them in the Super Bowl. So even though last year the Chiefs were not the best team and far from it, they found a way to really step it up when they needed to. What were the words people were using? They just need to flip the switch at the right time. And people weren't sure if it was going to happen. But they did flip the switch at the right time. It still was far from perfect. You still had drop issues. You still had fumbles. But they still stepped it up and played much better as the season went on. Chris says last night when Mahomes got hurt, you should have seen the hateful speak. Oh, I saw it, Chris. Oh, I saw it. There were a lot of people celebrating. They thought that was a season ender right there, which is funny to me because the defense was carrying Mahomes, but now that Mahomes is hurt, you were thrilled about it. If Mahomes is being carried by his defense, why do you care if he was hurt or not? I mean, again, these are people who just read box scores and stats. That's all they do. But man, there were a lot of people who, you learn a lot about people when they cheer someone's injury over a game, mind you. Like that's always interesting. That's always very interesting. So yeah, it is good to see the Chiefs definitely step it up. Oh yeah, people thought that he was faking his injury. You literally could see where the injury happened. They replayed it. It's not like it was just something out of the blue. I mean, you could see the injury. I love when people love to drive the narrative he faked the injury. Okay. All right. Whatever makes you believe in whatever you want to believe, whatever helps you drive that narrative. Yeah. It's always hilarious. That, by the way, looked very similar to Deshaun Watson and his injury. So, yeah, fortunately, it was just minor for Patrick Mahomes. Dude, the guy's just tough. I mean, Patrick Mahomes, that dude's gone through some injuries before. The knee injury in 2019, the same year the Chiefs won the Super Bowl. The ankle injury in the postseason, the same year they won Super Bowl 57. Oof. I mean, the things Mahomes did that postseason, I'll never forget. I will never forget. That might have been Patrick Mahomes' most impressive postseason in his career. There were a lot of games that came down to the wire last year, but in terms of Mahomes and what he was able to do, boy, he really showed out in that postseason where they beat the Jaguars and then the Bills. Or no, I'm sorry, no, they didn't play the Bills that year. They played the Bengals. And then the Eagles. Yeah, that's because I forgot the Chiefs had a first round bye. I forgot about that. All right, let's talk about the trade deadline because the Chiefs they were in it for Marshawn Lattimore. Unfortunately, Marshawn Lattimore did not come to Kansas City. The Chiefs felt like it was too high of an asking price to trade for Marshawn Lattimore. The word was that Marshawn Lattimore, or the Saints, they wanted a second day pick. So meaning a second round pick or a third round pick. And the Chiefs have three of those. They have a second round pick and two third round picks, one of them from the L'Jarius Sneed trade. Now I'm trying to bring up the details because it just felt like the Commanders who ended up getting him, they gave out too much. So the Saints are receiving a 2025 third round pick, a 2025 fourth round pick, and a 2025 sixth round pick. And the Commanders received Lattimore and a 2025 fifth round pick. Listen, I know Brett Veach values those third day draft picks. He really does. I'm seeing a lot of people say that they're glad the Chiefs did not make that move. I actually would not have been upset if the Chiefs made that move. a third rounder, which again, you have two of them, a third rounder, a fourth rounder, and a sixth rounder. And then you would get a fifth back with Lattimore. I would not have been upset by that return on investment at all for Lattimore. I think the Chiefs might have missed out on this one here, but I think it does make it more pertinent and a smarter move now that you got Joshua Uche and you do have Charles Omenihu coming back. So if you don't have someone to replace Jalen Watson and Najee Johnson, who are both right now injured, at least have a strong pass rush. And Kansas City's going to have that with Joshua Uche now. Charles Omenihu is going to be coming back, and I think that's very key. So if you weren't able to pull off the Lattimore trade, at least you got Uche. If you have a strong front defensive line, I think that will suffice in the meantime. I do. So at least they were able to make that move before the trade deadline. No activity from the Chiefs today, but I think they're still pretty happy with the activity they had in general, getting DeAndre Hopkins and Joshua Uche. An offensive tackle would have been nice, but I don't think there were a lot of options out there anyway. You got to go with what you got to go with now. It's already been a difficult season with the injuries, and you've still found a way to not make excuses about it and go 8-0. That's the most important thing right now for Kansas City. Travis Kelce playing like himself, playing much better. And I know I kind of mentioned this, but I kind of dived away from that topic because we kind of went all over the place there. But you look at Travis Kelce, he is playing much better football. The first 3 games, he had 34 yards against the Ravens, 5 against the Bengals, 30 against the Falcons. Then he started playing much better. Against the Chargers, he had 89 yards. Against the Saints, he had 70. The 49ers, quiet game, had 17 yards. Against the Raiders, he had 90. Against the Bucks, he had 100. Obviously, his best game of the year. Travis Kelce is playing much better football. And obviously, look at the last 2 games. Travis Kelce, the last 2 games, has 190 yards and 24 catches and a touchdown. I think DeAndre Hopkins has a lot to do with that. He's got a lot to do with that. His presence has certainly mattered. It has certainly mattered. Kansas City's offense is in a much better place now than it was a couple of weeks ago. 100%. The acquisition of Hopkins, and by the way, I know Jordan Schultz of Bleacher Report pointed this out. There were a lot of people who wrote off DeAndre Hopkins, and they said that the Chiefs made a mistake trading for him. Well, what do you say now? Because the same people right now who are impressed with Hopkins are the same ones who wrote him off and thought that he was not going to do anything with Kansas City. Listen, man, being in a good offense helps. Having a good head coach, having a good quarterback, having good players around you, that matters. There's a reason why Hopkins was not succeeding in Tennessee. There's a reason why. And now, 2 games in, 2 touchdowns, had a couple of catches last week, really had a bigger game this time around. And again, his presence when he's not getting targeted, it is helping guys like Travis Kelce and Justin Watson get more involved. Hopefully Xavier Worthy can get more involved. Little disappointing he didn't have a catch in this game, was targeted a couple of times. The running with him, the reverse, which never works, kind of tired of that. Hopefully they move away from that. But I think in general, this Chiefs team is playing much better football. Definitely playing way better right now. All right, we covered enough ground here on this episode of the Chiefs Zone podcast, so I'm going to go ahead and sign off here. Hey, we'll be back in a little over 24 hours, under 25 hours. Let's call it that. Tomorrow, 7 o'clock Central Time, we will break down the game between the Chiefs and the Broncos. It is going to be the first time the Chiefs and Broncos are going to play this season. It's going to be at Arrowhead. I will tell you right now, Kevin Harlan, Trent Green, they're calling that one. I'll tell you guys that right now. I know you guys always love hearing that. So for the second time in 3 weeks, second straight CBS game, you're going to get Kevin Harlan and Trent Green. You don't get Kevin Harlan a lot anymore because the Chiefs are a top-tier team. But I think now you'll take it because you don't get those guys often. I'll tell you right now, I do know that Jim Nantz and Tony Romo, they're going to announce the Chiefs and Bills game, unless that gets flexed, which I don't anticipate to be the case. Who's the refs? It's Brad Allen, I believe. I posted that, but I already forgot who it was. But yeah, we'll go over that tomorrow. But anyway, I'm excited for that. We will break down that game tomorrow. So join me in a little under 25 hours. We'll break down the game between the Chiefs and the Broncos. This Friday, we will do the Red Friday live chat. So join me for that. And then Sunday, 8:30 a.m. in the morning, because we have a 12 p.m. kickoff game, we're going to do the pregame live chat. Again, that's going to be 8:30 a.m. Central Time. And then we'll do the halftime live stream, and then we'll do the Chiefs Zone podcast following the game between the Chiefs and Broncos. That is what you guys have to look forward to with me when it comes to podcasts and live streams from now until the day of the game, through the day of the game, I should say. So make sure you guys join me for all of that. If you haven't done so already, make sure you guys are subscribed to the podcast. You're following me on Facebook. You're subscribed on the YouTube channel, all that good stuff. And continue to please share all the posts, the reels, the video content, the podcasts. You guys have been doing a tremendous job with that. The numbers are just soaring this season, the most ever we've had during a football season. So thank you guys so much for all of the engagement and support and sharing all the content. That really helps out a lot. So I appreciate all of you guys who've been doing that. My name is Farzi Vasugian. Thank you for joining me for this episode of the Chiefs Zone podcast. I'll talk to you all tomorrow night. Take care.